Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Scott Harris, your host. Today, I want to talk about the fine line. And that's the line that buyers always know they're going to cross. It's that line into the unknown, right? If you're buying a home, there is a certain amount of uncertainty and unknown that you're going to go into. However, what happens when you're in a competitive market? What happens when you're competing for the house? So not only do you have to find a house you love, but now you have to compete against other buyers, and you don't know how far you want to bid. And if you're not willing to cross the line, you're unlikely to get a house in this. And we're going to talk with Jeff Schofield from Rochester, New York. We started to bring on some really talented real estate agents from across the country to have this conversation, because it gets you behind the scenes to the mentality of what you as a buyer are going to go through in this climate, in other climates. Jeff's been an agent for almost 40 years. He's seen it all. What do? You don't want to make a bad bid. You don't want to make a bad decision, but you also want a house. I've had so many situations that are crazy, but I want to tell you one about a bidding situation which really caught me off guard. I had a buyer in Brooklyn. They were looking at townhouses, and Sunday happened to be an absolute monsoon of a storm. And I get a call at the end of the day, Scott, we went out and saw houses. And I said, oh my God, these people are serious if they went out in this weather. And they said, we want to make a bid on this house. So we bid on the house. It was accepted. And then 2 days later, I get a call from an agent lovely guy. He said, I have bad news for you. We have a higher bid and we're sorry. And he sort of indicated or intimated that the deal was dead. Well, I said, well, let me talk to my clients. Talk to them. And they said, we absolutely want this house. We have to have this house. They bid 5% above what the other deal was at. I called the broker back. I said, I have this bid for you. He said, oh my God, I had no idea that they were that interested. So well, all you had to do was ask, right? That was a time when it was competitive. And a lot of times this market in New York goes between being a buyer's market and seller's market. The pendulum swings. What I thought was really interesting, I'm not going to give it away, but there's one thing that Jeff said during an interview, which I think you're going to love, but I'm going to leave it for our conversation. So please enjoy this episode of The Pursuit of Home.
But this is my house, Mommy. The one I asked Mr. Springer for. It is, I know it is.
Welcome to The Pursuit of Home, coming to you from New York City. This is real people buying real estate and their unique journey to get there. We share the tips, tricks, and frameworks to help you navigate the bumps in the road that you won't see on reality TV or social media, and which no one has talked about until now.
Well, to discuss this, Jeff Schofield of Remax Plus joins us today. Jeff has been selling residential real estate in Rochester, New York, since 1992. And before that, he was doing commercial, I understand. He's one of Rochester's top agents. So, Jeff, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to set the table for our listeners. What's the average price point in your market?
Average price point in our market is probably about $150,000, believe it or not.
Would you be shocked to know that in New York City that the average price of a parking space is about $350,000?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember talking to a client of mine. He bought a dock slip for $350, just a place to put his boat in the wintertime.
Yeah, it's a different real estate market everywhere you go. I know that you represent both buyers and sellers, but based on where things are right now, how often are properties selling over the asking price? And I guess the follow-up to that is how far above do they go?
Well, I mean, I will tell you that I follow the industry as you do, other parts of the country. And I see other areas, especially out west and down south have slowed down. In the last month, we've slowed down. And for about the last 4 years, I'd say, since COVID, when the market kicked in, I had maybe 4 homes that didn't sell within the first week with multiple offers. In the last month, I've had 4 that didn't sell. Typically, the homes in our market will sell for about 15 to 20% over asking. And historically, with multiple offers.
So you're in that situation, and I know a lot of what you do is represent sellers, but when you represent buyers, how do you go about advising them when everything sort of goes out the window? I mean, do you run for buyers who aren't sophisticated yet, who haven't learned it? There's something called comps where a buyer's agent's going to go and see where things sold, just like the agent would do with the seller. But when they're working with the buyer, they're trying to advise what's the right price. They're trying to do the exact same thing that the seller agent's doing to advise their client. So what do you do when it's always going over the ask? Is it poker? I mean, how would you describe that for someone just starting out as a buyer?
Well, what we do is we have a consultation with the buyer. Now, obviously, everybody has a consultation with the buyer and has them sign the agreement. But, we would tell them, look, this is how it starts out. It starts out that you want to dictate the terms. You want to offer them below asking. You want it subject to your father looking at it, your engineer looking at it, and you're going to lose out on a deal. And then you're going to slowly start giving things up. And a lot of times, the average buyer in our market has probably lost out on about 4 or 5 homes before they finally get one.
How often does it happen that someone hits it the first time? Is it very rare? Never?
Seldom.
So there's a learning curve in probably every market where they have to get used to the fact that they're going to be competing not just against the seller, but against other buyers. What's the craziest bidding situation you've had? Okay, knowing that the average price point's 150, so maybe houses can be $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. What does an actual crazy bidding war look like?
Well, I mean, in the higher price ranges, obviously it's higher, but I had one property that I showed. One of my agents was in San Diego. She goes, I've got buyers. They've lost out on 5 homes. Can you show them this house? So before I went there, I ran comps on it, comparables, it was priced perfectly. It was priced at the high end. It wasn't priced perfectly for delayed negotiations, but it was priced about the top that I thought they could have bid. And we walked in the house and it had been remodeled. I mean, it was gorgeous. It's one of the nicest homes that I had seen in a couple years. And I walked out and the buyer and his wife, he goes, well, what would this appraise out for? And I said, what this would appraise for and what you'd have to pay to get it are 2 completely different things. And, I thought, geez, that's a little sarcastic. I apologize. He goes, no, I get it. We've lost out on 5 homes. So he put an offer in with the escalation clause. I'm sure you guys use those too.
No, please explain what an escalation clause is for people.
So when we started this whole process of it becoming a seller's market, which was the first time in my 33-year career, we would list a house on a Monday and we'd get 4 or 5 showings. And at the end of the day, I got an offer, full price. And my clients were happy. They thought I walked on water. And that lasted about 12 hours until the next day, a second offer for more money came in. Then, and that happened a lot. So what we started doing is saying, well, there's 2 groups of buyers out there. The group that's like not even working at their jobs. They're on Zillow and, your website, my website, Remax.com, every website out there, instead of working at their job and the second something pops up, they go see it. But there's also a group of people that will look casually. So we started doing delayed negotiations where we would put a house on the market and we would say, okay, we're going to show it for a week. And then 1 week in the evening, we'll entertain all offers. And the buyer said, well, if we've got this $300,000 house, we don't want to just pay $400,000 if we could get it for $3 or $310. So they come in with an offer of like $300,000 and they have an addendum and it says, if any other offer higher than ours comes in, we'll pay $10,000 more than that offer. And it just, it gets crazy.
And so in that situation, I mean, I'm sure people are out there going, how does that work? How does that work without fraud? I guess the answer is that you have to share copies of all the offers or something like that.
You have to share. So give you that example. Let's say they want $300,000 and, they say, okay, we'll pay $10,000 over any other higher offer up to a maximum of $400,000. And the next highest offer said they'd escalate to $375,000.
So then
the first buyer gets it for $385,000.
Got it. And there are parameters around that. I mean, I meaning that you and your sellers have committed to this process that you're describing, right? It's like a week goes by. Okay, we're going to collect all the offers, and then you're going to commit to one of them. That's how it works. Okay,
correct.
Now I want to zoom in, and I want to talk about when your buyer wins. Okay, like the property's not going to appraise, as you said, meaning that if you go to borrow money, like those people who paid, who were looking and they fell in love, what happened? How much did they pay?
They paid $210,000 over asking.
And what was the asking price?
Over the asking price was $430,000.
Okay.
So they went to like
50% more for the house than you thought it was. And you sort of were snarky, you said, and maybe for a second there and said, you're not going to get it for the ask and it's going to not appraise for that. Well, let's talk about the situation when they actually are worried. They're worried that the bank won't lend them enough money. What happens? Because in New York, we don't have a lot of mortgage contingencies like they do everywhere else. Meaning, like, people say, I know I can get a mortgage. I'm confident of it. And you probably have a situation too, where people have to waive that because otherwise they're not going to get the property. So what happens when someone pays 50% more? Were they paying cash?
They were paying cash. I asked the agent, I said, who can afford to do that? And he goes, they've got a multi-million-dollar trust fund.
Right. So let's go back to like real people buying real estate, which is the whole theme of this. They're financing. How do they go about doing this in a way that protects them in some fashion so that they can buy a home? How do they get protected when they know that the house isn't going to appraise? What are the programs? Because we don't have a lot of this in New York, and I know people out there are curious.
Well, some of the stuff we do is, first of all, if it's a very, very hot property, if you're subject to a mortgage, you probably won't get it because there's somebody that can have the ability to pay cash.
So even in the $400,000 price point, are those people getting help from family? Or are they just showing? I mean, how? Because I always thought, New York City, 60% of our clients are paying cash. It's very, very common, and the price point is $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million. So what is it like in a market like Rochester? Is it the same, or there's so much cash around?
In 2021, 22, it started to fit. In 21, I probably didn't sell a house subject to a mortgage. They were all cash. And then you'd have people subject to mortgages that would put in, we've got a couple lenders here locally that have what they call cash guarantee. There's one gentleman owns a mortgage company and you have to put a 20% down deposit. But if you decide you don't want the house, if you lose your job, he'll buy it.
He'll buy the house.
Yeah. I mean, I heard he bought like $4 million worth of property in the last 4 years.
He's bought that much? Is that what you said?
Yeah. He's done well in his business, I guess.
So if I'm hearing you right, Jeff, I think what I'm hearing, please tell me if I'm wrong, it's that there's a reason why buyers are frustrated right now, that if they're just folks who want to put down, say, 20% is like a reasonably conservative number as a down payment. But if they don't have the backup, that they're, in some ways, they could be really stuck. They could be in a market where they just can't find a house. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
That now it's softening up, but for 21, 22, that was exactly the case.
And so in that situation where you have a buyer, they're lovely people, they have good jobs, they have a good amount of savings, they're just not all cash. How do you advise them to make an offer that stays kind of in, call it like a comfort zone of some kind in this environment, even if it's softening a little bit? Is there a solution to really advise those clients?
Well, there's a couple things that we do, and it depends on, usually we call ahead of time to see if we have competition. If they say, yeah, we've got 4 offers on the table right now.
You just say, forget it.
Then, we can still give it a shot. So some of the things a mortgage buyer has done in the past couple of years is they will offer an appraisal guarantee. So you're buying that $400,000 house and you say anything under 400 down to 3.25, I will make up the difference in cash. So instead of putting 20% down, they might be putting 40% down, but they don't have the ability to put 100% or they pay cash.
So it's somewhere between the 20% down buyer who, or I know you were in the military, by the way, thank you for your service, but like you probably engage with a lot of people who are getting mortgage financing that's even more than 80%, right?
Yeah, in our market, we do a lot, especially now that it's slowed down a little bit.
Okay, so there's the buyer that can not just put down 20, but maybe a little bit more, which is kind of like a hybrid between the typical buyer and the all cash buyer. So there's the appraisal guarantee. Okay. And then if they don't have that and they're just the regular folks, is there any,
you ask, we talk with a client, what else can you do? Somebody might say, hey, we'd like to stay here a little bit after closing, so we've got time to find a place. I've sold homes where the buyers, they were getting a mortgage. They paid a good price for it, and they said, you can stay there up to 3 months rent-free.
I see.
We won't even
there's
charge.
Non-monetary ways,
right?
Like one buyer may be all cash and all that, but they need to move in right away. This way, they're like, no, we have flexibility on the time. So you're just constantly being like super resourceful to figure out like what moves the needle for this seller that may not be money.
Exactly. The best agents, when I've got a listing, they call me up and interview me. They're like, well, do they really want the appliances? I mean, if that's a Wolf stove, if they want it, they can take the stove with them. We'll buy a new stove, anything they can do. They can live here for 3 months free. They can leave I've sold estate homes where, they know that after it sells, they've got to clear out anything, and they're going, they can leave whatever they want. We'll take it and we'll dispose of it.
Yeah. I bought an apartment from an estate with my wife, and there was a piano, and we're like, you know what, just leave the piano, leave all this. We knew the piano was junk, but throwing out a piano can be, an endeavor.
Been there.
And the estate, all the kids from the sellers from the estate were not based in New York. It was everything was going to be a pain. So we tried to make it easy, but, well, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I think people, if you're listening, there's a lot of creativity that you can deploy when it comes time and in order to be competitive, and you want to have somebody like Jeff on your side. So if you happen to be passing through Rochester and want to buy a home, you should definitely be in touch with Jeff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Best thing about this episode is knowing that you have options to protect yourself if and when a property doesn't appraise. And I think if you're nervous already about buying a home, having some protection, especially when you're probably paying over asking price in many markets, must help you sleep at night. But I also want to point out and ask the question, how do you get over your original fear, that initial fear? How do you decide what property you're willing to bid way over the asking price on? And I guess it goes deeper. How do you trust your gut? How do you know when you're anxious and when you're excited? It must be very hard to discern. And as I've found, the best way to do that is to make a bid. Do that gut check by making the actual bid. But I also would say, of course, having a good agent at your side, making sure you've had the time to get educated in the market is going to be your best protection more than anything else you can do. The Pursuit of Home is produced by Fina Charlson with additional help from Karen Leonardi and the Moore Network. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and share this episode with your friends, and we will see you